What's going on, everybody? It's Real Man Alice 73. You know, Father's Day has arrived once again, and by now it's pretty safe to imagine that most of you brothers have probably spent recent weeks sitting back, tuned in, waiting to see what kind of national embarrassment black women were going to make of themselves this time. You know, like the way they did with Hallmark last year. Showing up on major news networks all over America begging to get exclusive credit on Father's Day. When I first heard about that nonsense, I was going to make a video talking about it. But then later I decided not to. There was already so much going on in 2012 that it was really better to just sit back and watch events unfold as they did. So I took the better part of last year and basically spent it showing support for what other brothers had to say on that and similar topics. And courtesy of YouTube's inability to monitor false flagging campaigns, a lot of what I had to say won't show because the videos have been deleted. But you know, I still took time to ponder and do some research. Because, you know, you got to sit back and wonder, exactly what is it that suddenly gives black women the right to denigrate black men like that on Father's Day? I mean, exactly what is it about black motherhood that not only gave them the right to insult black men on Father's Day, but even further the right still to claim that they deserve some sort of special credit for bringing up a family? You see, because bringing up a family where children are concerned requires more than just food and shelter. In fact, that's just the basics. Even people who raise dogs know better than that. What's even more essential is the recognition of the one thing that all good parents know, that family is the first form of government, and that whatever becomes practiced as popular culture among children these days is nothing but a reflection of the values being approved and oftentimes instilled at home. Now that especially becomes the case when those behaviors continue to be perpetuated without even the slightest measure of correction or even at least modification. Now if you look at the popular culture among black children today in most urban settings across America, it's very unlikely that you'll even find a remote reason to praise black women on Mother's Day, let alone Father's Day. So at this point, what we have is what they call a conundrum to it all. Because when you clamor special attention in the form of praise for something you've done, the testament of your glory is really supposed to present itself by the output of your work. So now we have black women claiming they want credit on Father's Day because according to them, black men just ain't no good. Meanwhile, under their watch, violent crimes among black children have seen a steady rise across America. Black women claim they want credit on Father's Day because according to them, black men can't handle responsibility. But yet, ironically, under their watch, teenage pregnancy for black women ages 17 and under has also seen a steady rise in America. Black women claim they deserve special credit on Father's Day because according to them, black men are abusive, oppressive, nasty, and just downright good for nothing. Meanwhile, again, under their watch, STDs and gang violence among black children have become so prevalent that they've even made their ways through the doors of American middle schools where black children predominate. I want you to stop for a moment right there and pause the tape and think about it, because that's pretty scary. In fact, it's just downright sad. You see, it's sad because ever since the early 70s, coming out of the feminist movement, black women have been determined to tell the whole world that the one thing they don't need is a black man. And sadly, though quiet as kept, this kind of thinking has become so prevalent that it's pretty much made its way throughout every major aspect of black American social life. Though most of you won't admit it, yet the fact is you can pretty much find it anywhere. It's found in television, and it's definitely found in the streets. It's found in literature, music, business, black so-called leadership, academics, religion, and sadly, even worse yet, it's even found in the home where it often has the most damage. And aside from blaming racism when all that damage is done, it's now become customary for most black women nowadays to do two things to avoid criticism when their bad behaviors backfire. On the one hand, they'll take the insane route and wrap the failures up in a feel-good slogan. There's really no shortage of black women claiming to be strong and independent. A black man ain't nothing but a thing, so she can do bad all by herself, and meanwhile pretend that it's all good. But when pretending that it's all good can no longer do any good, the only solution to the pretending is to do even more pretending. And this will be the part where they'll go back and follow the original plan of blaming. But instead of racism, the target now becomes the one thing they've already claimed they never needed, the black man himself. Now listen, you don't have to be a genius to take this kind of thinking and recognize black women's hypocrisy in it. In fact, if you've even recognized that much, then you're already on a roll. Most intelligent people have recognized that there's nothing but pure insanity, and if you recognize that too, then two for you. But what you got to understand is this. Self-deceit and circular reasoning have proven to be two very powerful plan hands for black women in the better part of 50 years. In fact, it's become so common that it's basically their core psychology. It's called self-aggrandization, and contrary to popular ignorance, black women have learned to use that as a way of thinking, and they've learned to use it to a level of mastery. You see, brothers, it gives them praise when in fact they deserve criticism. It makes them out to be victims when in fact they're actually the perps. And what you get from it all is this wonderful illusion. An illusion where no matter how wrong and irresponsible and reckless their behaviors may be, at the end of the day, black women could do no wrong. And of course, you and I know that that's just a bunch of nonsense. Now, I made a 2-part video series more than a year ago and posted it up on YouTube. The main theme of that video series was the fact that black women in America today are totally unfit for motherhood. Many people got upset with that video series, and as you would guess, the majority of those people were black women, and the rest, of course, were their Captain Save-A-Ho simped-up followers. There was a young woman that made a video response to the first video of that series. She submitted the video to me and requested acceptance, and after reviewing the video first, I then permitted the video to be attached to my own as a response. Now, side note, normally it's a bad idea to accept video responses from people when they disagree with you, especially if those videos clearly state they disagree with you. You see, it's bad for consistency. Makes it seem like your feelings go against your words, and many people out there who follow you because they support your ideas and your direction, they'll now draw back and look at you with the people's eyebrow because they don't know what side of the road you're really on. Given the recent pattern of hypocrisy from a lot of these Captain Save-A-Hos on YouTube in the past, one can totally understand what they mean by that. But anyway, with that said, on very few occasions in the past, I've actually accepted video responses from people who disagree with me. And many people who support my videos have often wondered why. And the reason for it is simple. You see, sometimes one of the best ways to prove that what you're saying is at least generally true is to give other people the chance to make an assumption of it being totally false. It's so you let them present their arguments, and you notice that their arguments are only based on exceptional cases. Key word, exceptional. You see, in order for a case to be exceptional, it has to go against what they call the mathematical norm. In other words, all things in the community becoming related by a general truth, and if that truth becomes the common basis by which they've established a majority, and hence the majority rules, then, generally speaking, everything you said was in fact truthful. And therefore, once again, I stand victorious, and they now stand corrected, and hopefully henceforth educated. Now, the young woman in that video made some very interesting comments. She basically stated that my video was, in her words, quote unquote, just a bunch of negativity. She presented her argument by way of using an exceptional case, which in this case was herself. I told the young woman that it was good that things turned out well for her and her family, seeing as how, according to her videos, she was apparently raised by a single mother. But that she also needed to understand and realize that the uniqueness of her example only further proved my case. And contrary to her lack of awareness, there were actually numerous other videos out there on YouTube actually made by other black women that even further proved my case. So one can only hope for the betterment of her own education that she actually took out the time to look up those videos I referred her to. Now, what the young woman tried to employ was really no new approach at all. In fact, it's a very common style of debate used by black women today when they want to promote their own vanity and discredit you at the same time. See, like a knife to a gunfight, they'll bring uniqueness, normally sampling their own person, and try to use it as an argument against your general statement whenever you criticize a particular subject within their greater collective, which in this case is modern-day black motherhood. They'll know what you say is true. In fact, it's so true it even outweighs theory. But accountability among black women is very seldom found these days. What's not so seldom found is the fact that when you look at the black community in most urban settings across America today, the term motherhood makes very little to no testament at all of black women actually being responsible and serious about raising children. Now, everybody tuned in a few years ago when Barack Obama gave black women all that totally undue pulpit praise for such a so-called wonderful job that they supposedly did at being single mothers. Before the whole world, he made it seem as if single motherhood in the black community was now a thing that rendered black women rightfully deserving of praise and glory. But there's a couple of questions that become of the order. What was all that praise deserved when those same black women took his parental handouts to promote their own personal greed and vanity instead of the welfare of their children? Where was that glory deserved when the money from an EBT card went straight from an ATM and into a fresh bottle of Moscato next to a brand new bag of lace fronts? Where was that praise or glory deserved when many black women across America filed their taxes, where they illegally filed the names of their children to people outside the home so they can in turn get extra money, that went unreported to the government? And of course, stuff like this is quiet as kept, but it's very common for black children today to have their names sold to people outside the home. That's a very common concept. Sad, but common. I mean, even now at this very moment, aside from child support rackets, one of the fastest growing hustles, and it is a hustle, being used by black women nowadays is something I never imagined would actually become so common. It's called lead poisoning checks. Well, lead poison hustle. Now listen, you got black women out there growing in numbers across America who not only brag about getting quote unquote that lead check, but even bragging further still of their intentions of using the money for anything except for the proper health care of the child that was actually exposed to the lead in the first place. And like I said, not to sound repetitive, but that's pretty sad when you think about it. In fact, it's just downright nasty. But when it comes to using kids for money or just their own personal greed, most black women today, they have no problem being nasty. Case in point, a couple of years ago back in upstate New York, a young black woman was kicked out of her house at the age of 16. She was sadly in a typical scenario. Her folks broke up, her father left the state, and the mother herself, a black woman, couldn't get child support. The mother decided to get nasty, and she decided to take her revenge on the daughter. And her way of doing this was by throwing her daughter out on the street. But you see, not long afterwards, the mother found out that the daughter qualified for lead poison compensation. And the amount she qualified for was to the tune of $250,000. So here's what she did with this information. She found out where the daughter was living, tracked her down, moved her back into the house, and made her live with her for another 2 years just so she can get the money. You see, the lead compensation couldn't be legally endorsed until the girl turned 18. So in other words, by assuming the brand new role of a loving, nurturing mother, for the next 24 months, the mother was basically making sure that she'd be the one getting primary dibs on the daughter's money when those checks came rolling in. The funny thing about that story, even though it's sad, is that I can tell you this. I used to live in upstate New York. Compared to New York City, it's really not a very big place. So therefore, news travels fast. You hear about things, you hear things about people, and from time to time, you realize that you got a friend or two that knows the people you heard about. And at first, it might sound odd, and so you get a little curious. You do some digging. You investigate. Make sure you get your story right. You don't want that feather in your hat belonging to an everyday bird in the wind, because articulation based on rumors can only make you look stupid. So you finally get your homework done and you come up with a full circle of the facts, and suddenly, once again, you're reminded of how small the world can be when you're living in cities of lesser populations. In other words, to sum it all up, I was able to learn two things. One thing I learned was that the story was totally true. The other thing I learned was that I actually knew a couple of people in that family personally. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because many people out there, upon hearing, they'll no doubt try to pretend that this is just a bunch of make-believe, when in fact, across America, even at this very moment, there's an almost countless and growing number of black children who do find themselves in households where the aftermath of scenarios just like this, they really pretty much become a part of everyday life. They can't do good in school because they can't concentrate. They can't concentrate because they're not being properly nourished. Good mothers are also good nurturers, you see. And good nurturers, by their nature, mandate good nutrition. Now, with that said, in this advanced day and age, you would think that it should be inexcusably easy for a black woman to take that concept and master it and retain it basically as a natural responsibility. Yet, ironically, black children today, even in their teenage years, are finding themselves having to suffer complications that most black people in previous generations didn't even have to worry about until their 50s, 60s, and in some cases, even the 70s. So, that doesn't really speak well about black women and their idea of being nurturers, let alone good mothers. I mean, look at what these kids are having to live on. Aside from a stale-bread bologna sandwich next to a bowl of King Vitamin, many black children nowadays are being forced to psychologically raise themselves, which also includes nutrition, which in their case, in other words, is just a bunch of junk food. But meanwhile, what are the mothers doing? The mothers are chilling up at the clubs with a bag full of Harlem 125 plastered to their heads. And at that point, pretty much business as usual. I mean, everybody knows what she's going to be doing there, for the benefit of the kids. Showing off the brand new keys to a Louis Vuitton purse. Sipping down a glass of Nouveau with her homies. Shaking her half-naked filthy ass on the dance floor. Taking a bunch of slutty pictures in front of some airbrushed background. And begging for the day it shows up on Facebook with a bunch of raunchy comments. No regard is going to be made for the kids that had to be left behind for that scenario. And even less regard is going to be made for the repercussions that will take place on them in the future. But you can best believe that later on in life, she'll be the main one claiming that she has no idea as to why her kids were just as unfit for society as she was of a mother in the first place. And you know what's really sick about that concept is that when you take scenarios like this and look at it, take it across the country, you'll notice that scenarios just like this are being filled with the faces of black women all over America. And on them same faces come the very mouths that are nowadays throwing wolf tickets on Father's Day. I can't speak for you, but I can say this. There's only one word that comes to mind when I hear black women doing that. Disgusting. Because it is disgusting. I mean, when you take a course of action that you already know is reckless, irresponsible, and barring all repercussions on others, no matter how grave it might be, that first of all makes you selfish. In fact, more importantly, it just makes you downright evil. And when those same repercussions become the reasons why you got blood on your hands, you got to be a pretty sick person to sit there and think you deserve some sort of special praise for it. I mean, here we are now on Father's Day, 2013, and black women claim they deserve some sort of special attention on that same day. When the truth of the matter is, most of them actually should have ran and hid their heads in shame on the 12th of last month. I mean, we've literally made it past the first decade of the 21st century with advancements in technology, education, nutrition, access to information. We have the power to be geniuses, prodigal geniuses, I mean literally at our fingertips. And it can literally fit right in the palm of your hands. I mean, that's a lot of power. We got the power to have high-powered mainframes in the palm of our hands. Shit that would have required an entire building with a mainframe computer 20 years ago. I mean, that's what these kids have now. And yet, even despite these advancements, black children today are in a state of crisis. You know, they're in a state of psychological crisis almost more than ever before. And that faded memory of what we call the black community is virtually burning down to the ground. And what do we find black women doing? Knocking on the door of Hallmark, making sure that they'll still be praised as the queen of the ashes. That's pretty sick. So to all you brothers out there taking care of your children, or even more commonly these days, someone else's children. To all you brothers out there going to work, going to school, or even trying to do so, or in the process of doing so. To all you brothers out there living righteous, minding your business, taking care of yourselves, and passing on the example for other brothers to do the same. Real Man Allen 73 says, thank you. Thank you for representing what it truly means to be truly strong and independent, where the phrase itself is a way of life and more than just a feel-good slogan. Thank you for keeping it real. Thank you for showing the world what it means to have the most impeccable character as human beings, starting from the bottom with all the odds against you and still rising to the top. Thank you for being able to do all of that and still stand strong, even in the face of those who are stupid enough to claim that they deserve the credit for all of your hard work. In other words, brothers, happy Father's Day. Real Man Allen, 73. You take care.